For decades, families have been told that love, support, and staying connected to a child struggling with substance use is enabling, and that tough love is the only way to help. We don't hear enough about the families who are going against that narrative and choosing other paths to family recovery. This is part of an ongoing series meant to elevate the voices of families recovering through relationship. What I find particularly powerful about Sheree's story is that her son's recovery represents the reality of many recovery journeys. It didn't happen in a straight line or on a predictable timeline. It happened after more than 30 treatment attempts. While her son was finding his way, Sheree was finding hers. She kept doing her own work and didn't put an expiration date on her hope. If you've ever caught yourself waiting for recovery to look a certain way or feel like it should have happened by now, this episode is for you. Before we get to her story, let me tell you a little bit about Sheree Stillwell. Sheree is a mother whose son struggled with substance use disorder for over 20 years. She tried everything she was told to try: Al Anon, counseling, detox, treatment facility after treatment facility. None of it was working. When she was introduced to craft, an invitation to change, she says much of it went against everything she'd been told previously, but it was the first approach that didn't go against her heart. She changed, he changed, and today they both call themselves in recovery. So thank you so much for being here today, Cherie.
Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
So let's start with where you were at and what you were believing when you first started trying to support your son when you found out he was struggling with substance use. We talked about how you were really the only thing you knew about was 12 steps. You tried Al Anon, you couldn't relate. Then you went to the support group where the leader was really into the 12 steps, but yelled at the parents, which sounds horrible. What were these experiences like for you? And like, how long were you stuck in this not being able to find help?
Oh, well, I can still vividly remember the phone call that I got. Um, Chad was almost 14 from school, and him and his buddy um, smelled like weed when they came through security. So they pulled him aside and they checked their backpacks, and lo and behold, they both had weed in their backpacks. So when I got that phone call from the school, I had to come pick him up. I mean, I was like devastated. I like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And little did I know, years later, I'd be like, that wasn't really anything compared to what we're dealing with now. But there was just nothing. We did go to a program at the local hospital for teen boys. Um, a great counselor. He was really good. One thing that just stuck with me though was the parents were supposed to come on a Saturday morning, and it was generally me, myself, my husband, or if my husband had to work, it was just me and one other father. And the counselor would go around the room to these other 8, 10, 12 boys and be like, well, where's your parents? And the response would be, they said this doesn't do any good. Where's your parents? Oh, they've given up on me. They say they're not going to waste their time coming here. And as that same kind of response went around the room, I can remember sitting there and just being like, God, please don't ever let me give up on him. Please don't ever let me give up on him. And if it wasn't truly for my faith, I would never have been able to make it through all those years. And like I said, there was really no support. I did go to Al Anon, which in itself, great program for a lot of people. But I had a 14-year-old, and I was in a room with women that were 60 and 70. I thought that was old then, not now. Uh, you know, but they're just talking about their husbands and they're kind of bashing their husbands. And I'm like, I can't relate to this. He was told to go to AA. He couldn't relate to them in AA, and they certainly couldn't relate to him. So that cycle just went on. And I really couldn't find anything. And then, as you mentioned, I eventually, many years later, found this one support group. I drove quite a ways to attend it. I went every week, but the gentleman was, he was very harsh. And we would have 50 families there, 50, 60 people. And he would just get in your face and scream at you. You're killing your son, you're killing your daughter, blah, blah, and it just all, he believed in the whole tough love and cut him off and, all of this. It just went against my heart. And eventually, another gentleman that was attending and I both started our own support groups. He was in another town, I was in my town. Didn't even know what I was doing. But I knew what I had experienced wasn't right for me, and, that there had to be other parents out there like me, and it took off. It went really well, and during that time, I was introduced to craft and, invitation to change and motivational interviewing. I did lots of training. I'm certified in that. Trained with the best of the best, Dr. Robert Myers and Dr. Ken Carpenter, and, from the Center of Motivation and Change. And I had always went into every attempt that I'm going to fix him. I'm going to find out how to fix him. Oh, he went to treatment. He's going to be fixed. Uh, and then it dawned on me, this is for me. I've got to live and I have to change how I'm living because this is killing me. I mean, literally, physically, I was not in good condition. So I did a lot of training. I did all kinds of workshops. I met so many of the most wonderful people I'm still friends with today, across the whole United States. And as I began to change, and I applied the craft principles to everybody. My husband, my grandson, who we adopted, my son's child, we brought him home from the NICU. He was a preemie. We adopted him. He's 13 and a half, as he says now. But I use those principles in my everyday life, um, because they work and they're respectful of the other person and of me. Um,
Mhm.
I learned about boundaries, good boundaries, and I learned that that is not a punishment. Um, I learned about consequences and the importance of natural consequences, um, at any time possible. Um, and that was hard for me. That was hard.
Mhm.
So that was my journey for years and years and years.
So, one, I'm glad that you listened to your heart and that you were brave enough to realize that that was not working for you and try something else. I know that I wished I had been able to do that sooner. It's heartbreaking to look back and think about that the number of years it took for that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast series and share stories like yours is to give parents that permission to listen to their hearts because they're told for so long, you can't trust yourself. Don't listen to yourself.
Right.
You're killing your kid, like what the guy said to you.
Mhm.
And so it's just so important because nobody knows our kids better than we do. And so we really need to learn to trust ourselves. And I like what you said about eventually realizing this was for you. I did the same thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to do these things so that she can see me doing them and maybe she'll start doing them. And eventually, like the magic really started happening when I started doing it for myself. That's when I saw the changes in Helena and our relationship. But I want to go just back a little bit more in your story and talk about how before you found craft and started listening to what your own values were and what felt right to you, How did that affect your mental health and your relationship with your son and your kind of your daily life when you didn't really know what to do and you were getting all this tough love advice and being blamed?
Yeah, I felt very guilty, um, for a lot of reasons. Uh, it was hard. It was a struggle. It was an awful struggle, and I do have people ask me now, "Why do you still do this? Why do you still advocate? Why do you still, facilitate support groups?" All of that, and because I want to give back. And if I can help any other parent not feel alone and provide them with a lot of opportunities, there's so much out there now. Maybe there was then, I don't know, but I didn't find it. Um, so every day, my day would be based on if I'd heard from my son or not. If I'd heard from him, okay, I'm going to move through the day, not with joy, but I'm going to move through the day. And if I hadn't heard from him, my mind was just spinning and ruminating on, okay, is he alive? Is he not alive? Is he in jail? Whatever. Um, and I was working an extremely stressful job, um, on deadline all the time, 65 hours a week. Um, for part of those years, I was in graduate school. So I was doing all of that at the same time. And then we had Jaden, who needed lots and lots of therapies, um, just a whole, just totally reparenting again from a whole different perspective. So I felt like my life was really spinning out of control. I I didn't have control of anything, and I didn't even have control myself. And I knew something had to change.
Mhm.
And my relationship with my son was not good. Anytime we would have a phone call or a text, number one, he was asking for money. Number two, I would get extremely loud and yell. And why can't you stop this? And you're killing me. And you're breaking us financially. And, just on and on and on. Well, if somebody was talking to you like that, would you want to call them again or text them? No. When I think back about it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, how can you not see this? But that's how I lived every day. I put my life on hold. I didn't attend events. One, I didn't want to have to make up excuses. Two, I had to be here in case he showed up, in case he called. I had to be available. Um, and it was just a horrible way. I wasn't living. I was existing. Much like he was. He wasn't living. He was just trying to exist day to day.
Yeah. It's so true. I see that parallel all the time with parents that we are having it's playing out differently, but we're actually having this similar parallel experience.
Mhm.
But because society says it's them, they're the problem, they have to change, it really honestly, it leaves us kind of stuck because we're stuck until we reach that point, that turning point of, "Oh, I've got to do something about this." Like, it's like if I got in a car accident and broke my arm, nobody would tell me that other person has to go to physical therapy with me and fix that, right? Like, it would be common knowledge that it's up to me to fix this.
Right.
And that just is so freeing when we finally realize that. And I had this moment of I'd gained weight, I wasn't exercising, I was really sick, I'd gotten bronchitis, it turned into to pneumonia. I really thought my dad had a heart attack and died when he was 47. I was around that age and I was like, I'm going to end up just like my dad if I don't drastically change my life. Like, do you remember what that moment was like for you?
I do. I would kind of half-heartedly joke that, you know, I had several addictions. I was a compulsive overeater, and all of that stress just, exasperated that. Um, but my other addiction was to my son. I was addicted to everything about him. Like I said, if I'd heard from him, if I hadn't heard from him, at one point, I didn't see him for over 23 months. And he was homeless on the streets of Chicago, the west side of Chicago, for 7 years. So that was hard. Um, but when I stopped kind of joking about it and actually accepted the reality that I was addicted to him, I was basing my whole existence around my son. Now, the thing is, I have another son. I have a son that's 4 years older than him. And I have apologized to him that because I can remember saying to him, I don't have to worry about you. You got it together. You're in graduate school. You're responsible. And later, when I realized that was not good to say because it was like I was setting him off on the side. He is a mental health professional now, and and he says, I let that go a long time ago with me. Unfortunately, he's estranged from his brother. That's a whole another story and a heartache. And a lot of families they deal with that. But once it was just like I sat up and took note. I can't continue like this. And especially having to raise Jaden. I have to be here for Jaden. That's when it all kind of came together with learning things through craft and motivational interviewing, invitation to change. I started getting healthier. It was over years. But when I really delved into craft was during COVID because I was working from home and I could take my break and I could study and I could do this. And I really jumped into craft then. And that's when my life really started to change. My health started to change. My mental health started to change. Um, just like my physical appearance, I did have lost a lot of weight, but just like I had light in my face again and in my eyes again. And I could have joyful times, especially with Jaden, and not feel guilty. Prior to that, if we were going to go out to eat, it would be like, how can I go out to eat? I don't even know if my son has any food. And the reality was, he wasn't worried about food. He was worried about not being sick and making it through the next couple of hours. And that was hard to accept. But once I did, I slowly but surely plugged along and it's made a huge difference.
Yeah. And so I think it's interesting how, like, we understand we have to work at our physical health. Like,
Mhm.
we don't think there's anything wrong with us if we have to train for a marathon or to lift heavier weights. But for
Right.
some reason, we have this idea that mental health should come naturally. And so I love to talk about like how hard I work at my mental health and just living a high quality life, which is something I really didn't even understand before. I mean, it was a gift of this work. But for you, I'd like you to just share a little bit about the effort that you put into this and how it's actually a part of your everyday life now, because I want to normalize that too, that there's nothing wrong with you, that you have to work at this or that you need help and support.
Well, like that old saying, it's okay to not be okay. And, I live that and I walk through it. But there's certain things that I do every day um, that I just need. Very simple things. My little guy Jaden, my grandson, and he knows. When I get up in the morning, I have to have 30 minutes. I have to have numerous cups of coffee. I read my devotional. Um, I just kind of sit with myself and I'll go over my day and what I have to do, but I am not just delving in immediately without just kind of composing myself. And so I do that every day for my mental health, doing the support groups, whether I'm co-facilitating it or whether I am attending it. Um, that helps tremendously with my mental health. Um, and doing things that I like to do. I like to read. I like to go to the pool. You know, I don't watch TV really ever. So that's not a thing for me. But I like to watch podcasts, watch different things that I'm interested in, watch cooking shows because I love to cook. So I those things I do for myself. And I do have boundaries. Um, even like with my mother. Um, my mother is 90. We just had a huge party for her. I love her dearly. But my mother thinks when she needs something done, it has to be right this minute. I mean, get in your car and come over here and get this letter and take it to the post office. That kind of stuff. And so, you know, I would resent. I would do those things, but then I would have this resentment. And then I would feel guilty that I have this resentment. I'm sorry.
That's
Alexa,
okay.
Alexa just started playing music. So I did put some boundaries, even on my mom. You know, like, Mom, I'm there on this day, this day, this day, this day. My husband's there on the off days. And between the two of us, we'll get done your tasks. We'll get them done. So, and learning that no is a complete sentence and it's okay. It's okay to say no.
Yeah. So, all these ways that you take care of yourself and all the things that you learned with craft and invitation to change, things started shifting in your relationship with your son. And there was a time he even said, like, we haven't had a conversation like this in years. So, what do you think shifted in how you interacted with him and how that felt to him to create that openness for you guys to truly connect and be able to talk to each other honestly?
Sure. This Alexa keeps coming on. Can I just go unplug it? Can you
Yeah.
hear it?
Yeah.
Well, slowly. It was slowly. Of course, nothing, was overnight. But slowly I learned when I did hear from him via text or a phone call, um, not to jump in on what are you doing? You still using none of that. I would tell him fun things Jaden was doing, um, things that, we were doing as together or going over to a birthday party or stuff like that. And as I quit focusing on his usage, he called more often and he would text more often. There were times I would just say to him, I mean, I'd text him probably 50 times. And I'd finally just say, just give me a thumbs up. You don't have to talk. You don't have to reply. Just give me a thumbs up so I know you're okay. Um, so things slowly started to change. And, one thing that I dealt with a lot prior to learning anything different, I had to call the morgue probably 4 times. I called numerous hospitals in Chicago, all around the West Side, um, numerous times because he never had an ID on him. Never. Main reason he didn't have it, well, he'd lose them, but also a lot of times he had warrants out for missing a court date, traffic offense, missing a court date. So he didn't want an ID on him because sometimes he'd just make up a name, and if he wasn't stopped for something really bad, they let him go. But if he'd had his ID on him, they would have taken him to jail. So I was always worried he could be hurt or he could be dead, and I would never know because he never had an ID on him. When I think back about that, I'm like, that is just so unnormal. I mean, who does that? Who has to do that? And that was like, it feels like a lifetime ago, you know? But our relationship started to change. He uh, he was working on his harm reduction. And a while ago, years ago, I didn't really know anything about harm reduction. I don't even think I knew that that was a term, but I didn't believe in it. Whatever that was, I didn't believe in it. I was told you got to be totally, completely abstinent. That's what I believed in. And as I met some of the most wonderful people, for anybody that's watching this and they know Laura Fry from the McHenry Crystal Lake area in Illinois, she is a wonderful, wonderful harm reductionist, and she taught me a lot. Um, he did it his own way, and it wasn't in one of the 30 treatment facilities. He slowly reduced his use, changed his method of use. Still not totally abstinent, but alive. He was alive. And then he went on some medicated assistant treatment. And, you know, you hear all that. You're just substituting one drug for another. He was alive. If that's what it took, I'm okay with it. And that went back and forth. He did that for several years. But one day he was here and we were sitting in the living room and we were just talking. I don't know, maybe half an hour or so. And he said, Mom, I don't think we've had a conversation like this in years. I said, You're right. And I, I had to stop and think about it. I'm like, You're right. We were having a normal conversation like normal families would have. And we played games and card games and stuff. He's not a game person, but he would pacify me. So things just really started to change. And he has told me numerous times, Mom, through everything, you are the only person that I knew would always be there. And I'm like, and I always will be there. You know, whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here. Um, you know, some people say that doing something like that, you're condoning. You're condoning that they're still using it some form or some type, even the medicated assisted treatment, you're condoning. I'm just condoning that he is alive. And if he needs some kind of medicine to help him, so be it. I'm a diabetic. I've been on diabetic medicine since I was like 24 years old. I have to have it. I have to have it my whole life. You know, people don't look down on that. There's no stigma around that. Other than when I was extremely, extremely obese, of course, people would say, well, if you lose weight, you know, I would have still
Mhm.
been a diabetic. I've lost 165 pounds and I'm still a diabetic. Okay. But we have a good relationship. He's living as normal of a life as he can live. He has compromised his health in so many ways. He's a very unhealthy person. He's only 42. He's extremely unhealthy. So he may have 5 good days a month, and the other 25, he does not feel well. A regular person would get a cold, his goes into pneumonia. You know, he was hospitalized in January and then he ended up with kidney failure. 6 months it took on steroids for his kidneys to finally begin to function, you know, properly and increase. Somebody else that it might have only taken him 2 months. But we're enjoying what we can enjoy, day to day. And I'm proud of him. I'm very proud of him. He's been through more than I know, and sometimes I think I really don't wanna know all of it. Because there's times when he'll share some stuff with me, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh," you know? How and I can remember telling my older son, who has such a hardened heart towards his brother, I cannot imagine living his life. I cannot imagine waking up every day and doing what he has to do to survive that day. I can't imagine it. And he's come through that. And he's had some rough spots. That's life.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, when you stop judging it and you start having that compassion, that's something I think about a lot still is I used to be so judgmental of the things Helena was doing, and now I look back on it with compassion and I think, one, how did I make decisions that played into that. And yeah, I can't imagine what it felt like for her so many times, like not having anywhere to go as an 18-year-old and walking the streets all night, knowing she had nowhere to go. Like, I just can't imagine it. I'm not strong enough.
No.
I wouldn't have made it. I don't know what I would have done, but so that compassion is just so helpful. Um, and there was something else that you said that I wanted to touch on, but now I can't remember what it was. So we'll just keep moving. Maybe
Well, one
harm reduction. I did want
yeah,
to say, just to normalize what harm reduction is, it's a seatbelt is a harm reduction. Like anytime you
yes,
get in a car, you could die.
right,
So it is an unsafe activity, but we do it all day, every day. It's legal. And so we want to be able to make it as safe as possible. So we wear a seatbelt. And if you think about substance use, right there, we accept that there's risk and that people are going to use substances, and we want to do what we can to make it as safe as possible. And
mhm,
that helps me to, understand why it is actually, and it makes a person feel like, well, we feel like your life is worth trying to save.
right,
Right? You matter, right? You matter just as much as the person driving down the road in their car.
right. And, I've heard this, and I don't know if I heard it from, Gabor Mate or who I heard this from, but a long time ago. Um, and I know I've said this. I know I've said this. "What is wrong with you?" Just like that. "What is wrong with you?" When the response or the question should have been, "What happened? What happened to you?"
Why are you hurting so bad?
And I did ask my son numerous times, um, in his teen years, uh, "Did something happen? You can tell us," because I read a lot on trauma and triggers and this and that, and I'm thinking, "He's exhibiting all that kind of stuff now. Something must have happened." He never said anything until he was 24. And when he was 24, he had a breakdown, and he called me, and he told me he was sexually abused when he was between 6 and 7 years old that summer by someone in the neighborhood. And I just went into complete, like, shutdown. How could I not know this? What a horrible mother. What was I doing when he came home? How could I not know this? And then, like you said, when you look back, when I found that out and I looked back, that's why every day when he went to first grade, they would call me that he had a headache, that he had a stomach ache, and I would go get it. That's when he started having trouble sleeping. He didn't want to close his eyes, he didn't want to go to sleep because this person threatened that if he told anybody, he would kill his brother and he would kill us. He would kill the dog. And he's a little bitty kid, you know? So when I look back on those kinds of things, that was why. So as he got a little bit older, he had to find something that would take away those memories, take away those feelings, the shame. He felt immense shame because he was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. All the neighborhood kids, they would go to this closed down paper mill and they weren't supposed to. It wasn't safe. And they would ride their bikes down the ramps, like the loading dock ramps. Well, he was the youngest and the littlest, and everybody decided they were going. It took him a while to get his bike and get on his bike and start to get going, and then there was the man there. Um, and we don't know, he was 6, 7 years old. He doesn't know. He said a man. That could be a 17-year-old, to a little
Right.
kid. So we never knew. But knowing that, it's like, did I really want to know that? Yes, I did, because it answered so many questions about why, in learning, beyond addiction, it says, it makes sense. Why does it make sense? It makes sense to them because it's helping them cope with this trauma that they've never coped with, you know?
Mhm.
So, of course, it didn't make sense to me until I started to understand those things. But that that was a big eye opening. Is not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah, I was so ill-informed about trauma, and I really didn't realize also that maybe it's not one big trauma like your son experienced, but
Mhm.
multiple different traumatic experiences or, smaller traumas building up. Right?
Yes.
There's just so many different things that could happen. And that's why I love that behaviors make sense perspective because I used to always ask that same question, like, what is wrong with you? And I
Mhm.
don't think, what is wrong with her? And when I flipped it around to how does this make sense?
Mhm.
That's just so much better of a question because it just gives you a different perspective. And it's so much less takes out the judgment and the blame and the let's just get down to the humanness of this, which
Right.
is so important. So one last question that I want to ask is well, it's going to be two parts. One is that so your son went to over 30 facilities
Mhm.
and you stopped counting at some point.
Yeah.
That's why I used to say over 30.
Yeah.
But one, how did you maintain hope during all of that? Because it's so easy to think, oh, if it doesn't happen the first time or second or third, that it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, like, what do you want to offer to parents who are going through that? When their kid has gone through so many different facilities and they just think it's never going to happen.
Well, a couple things. One thing I had someone say to me, and I did not like it, but it was the truth. They said, not everybody recovers, not everybody makes it. And I was like, are they trying to like prepare me? Because I've been preparing myself every single day for how many years, preparing for that phone call, that knock on the door. But yeah, there were times when I I did I did feel pretty hopeless. I mean, I planned a funeral in my head. I wrote stuff down. Um, but I had a really good friend. I worked with him. He actually um, does a wonderful group called Hero in our area. His name is John Roberts. And I worked at the university with him. And unfortunately, his 19-year-old son, Billy, passed from an overdose. And I was at a really, really difficult time in Chad's using. And I was at a big event. I was actually doing this event at the university. And John came up to me and he asked me, how are you doing? And I just said, John, I don't have any hope. There's not even an ember. And he said to me, "Is he still breathing?" I said, "Yeah, as far as I know." He said, "Then there's still hope." And I held on to that simple phrase all those years. And, you know, don't stop until your miracle happens, all that kind of stuff. I just hold on to that. I I'm like, I'm not going to give up hope on him. I prayed and asked God not to ever let me give up on him. And I know I am not going to give up on him. So there is hope. And it might not be what we think, how we want it to be. We might want them to be totally abstinence free and have this great job and a family and all that. That's not what happens with some people. Some people do have to continue to take medication. Some people do still use some type of substance. Um, but if we can mitigate the harm and help them have as good a life as they're willing and are able to do, um, you know, that's what I'll do. In my reality, is it right? Is this good? Is this healthy? Not always, but I'd rather have that relationship with my son than say, until you can be the perfect son and not use any substances and do this and do that and do this and do that, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. Absolutely not.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I would just tell anybody out there, any parent out there that's struggling, there is hope. Try to keep that relationship open, that communication open.
It's so important. Um, I think at one point I made the decision, like I reached that point, maybe she'll never get into recovery. And if she doesn't, how do I need to be living my life
Mhm.
with no regrets? So I'm
Right.
10 years from now, I don't look back and regret how I lived the next 10 years. And I just decided to make the most of the relationship that was available to me and to figure out how do I make this work for me without her changing at all. And like you said, it's prioritizing the relationship and the connection. And yes, there is disappointment that we need to balance about what we would like to have. But if we focus on appreciating and growing what we do have,
Mhm.
there's just so much more available to us than we realize.
Absolutely.
So, you have a couple of services that you offer. If you want to share what those are, and then I'll put the links to those in the show notes.
Sure. Um, I have the privilege to co-facilitate a support group for families with a loved one that struggles with substance use or is in recovery. And I co-facilitate with Jill DiLoretto. She's from Minnetonka, Minnesota. I'm from the Chicago area. Um, and the group is Addiction Recovery for Family and Friends. And you can find it on Facebook under Families Recover Together. And then something that we see a lot of in families who have adult children that struggle is grandchildren, grandchildren that need to be taken care of. And there are over 200,000 grand families in the state of Illinois, just Illinois, that are raising grandchildren. And that's not an accurate number because there's so many that's unreported. So I'm also involved in grandparents raising children support group. I facilitate that, and that's an in-person group here in the Will County area. But my new endeavor with extreme passion um, is Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Illinois. And my dear friend Dawn Belasevic is the founder. I'm the co-founder of that group. And we have a Facebook group, which I'll send you that link and an email. We provide research information. We provide factual, documented laws, uh, everything for Illinois. It's not something you just grab off Google. It's from official um, sites. We can answer a lot of those questions. We can direct people to the right place to get their answers. So we offer support, education, resources, and advocacy.
All right. I'll put all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience. I know that a lot of parents listening will be able to relate, and it'll be helpful to know that somebody else went through this and what they're experiencing is it's completely normal. That there's nothing wrong with them.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, thank you. Thank you again very much.